So we've created the skeleton and I've named all of the joints so they have descriptive names. And I think this is very important, especially as we move to the next step. If you can imagine that if this hierarchy had all these same joints, but they were all called joint 1, 2, 3, 4, that wouldn't tell us anything about what they are. But with these descriptions, it just makes working with this easier. It makes the next step, which will be the skin weights, easier. It makes animating it easier. So let's go ahead and move on to the next step, which is binding the mesh or meshes to the skeleton. Now, I created this with multiple meshes, although it could be a single mesh and that would work just fine too. I'm going to select all my meshes and I'm going to select the root of my skeleton. And then I'm going to go to Skin. Bind Skin will open up its options. And I'm going to go ahead and just reset, make sure that it's at its defaults. We could change some of these settings, but I think the default setting should work just fine. And I'm going to go ahead and apply. And now that we've applied the skeleton, you'll see that if I grab that hip and I move it, everything moves with it. And if I select some of the individual joints and rotate them, the beetle deforms accordingly. Let's grab one of the pinchers and see how well that works. So you can see that there are some skinning issues, but it is working. Grab one of the legs. So it's working, but what we need to do now is to refine the skin weights on our meshes. Now, to work on the skin weights, what I can do is select, in this case, we'll select this mesh here, and go to Skin, Paint Skin Weights, and open up the settings. And what you'll notice here, this is one of the reasons why it is so valuable to name the joints, to give them meaningful names. We can easily select the joints in here and we know exactly what we're selecting. Abdomen 1, abdomen 2, abdomen 3, and so on. Now, these colors that we're looking at, if I select abdomen 1, the warmer the color, the more influence that joint, in this case abdomen 1, has on these vertices. So you can see here that we have this color ramp. Again, if it's white, then it means it's being affected by that joint 100%. Red is very strongly influenced by that joint. As we get to cooler and cooler colors, it becomes less and less. Finally, when we get to this blue color, it means that it's only affecting those vertices very, very slightly. What I want to do is actually paint the skin weights so that they're more strongly influenced. In this case, these vertices here. We want these vertices that are close to the joint to be more strongly influenced by that joint. And to do so, I can work with these different brushes here, as well as its opacity or value. And we can also either replace, add, scale, or smooth. I typically use replace and add. Sometimes I'll use smooth. Replace literally replaces the value, and if we wanted to give that a try, let's say, and we have it set to 1 right now, we can do that. The other thing to keep in mind is if you press B, use the left mouse button, you can change the size of your brush, just as you can with lots of other tools in Maya. I'm going to make my brush about this big, and we'll just start painting on it. And you can see that what I'm doing here is actually making the influence of that abdomen 1 joint much stronger on these verts. It means it's going to influence those verts much more strongly. In fact, I might go ahead and just make the brush very large and paint the whole thing like that, so it's being 100% influenced by that joint. I'll go to joint 2, look approximately where it's located, maybe make my brush a little smaller. Again, I don't really think I'm going to need to bend this abdomen area, but if I choose to later on, I'll have that ability, especially if I want to just do it very, very slightly. Take these verts, maybe paint them for the for that other joint there, and actually that should be good. Looks like we missed some down here. Might need to check this other joint here and make sure that we get some of those verts painted. And if we want, we could try the smooth to kind of blend that a little bit. You have to be a little bit careful with that tool. We can test it out and see how it's working. It's like that abdomen joint. And the abdomen too. Now, one of the advantages to the way that I modeled this is that because I did keep it in pieces like this, I can actually quickly and easily hide parts of the mesh, which will allow me to better see what I'm actually painting on this. And I think I'll just spend a little bit more time refining these skin weights. Another tool that is quite useful besides the replace tool that I've been using so far is this add tool. And if I select that, what I can do is put, let's say, a different value. Instead of 1, we could just put 0.2. And then what I can do is I can start gradually adding weights to some of these vertices so that some of these verts will be partially influenced by abdomen 1 and partially influenced by abdomen 2. So you can see that when I paint on that, we get this cool color here because I've just added 0.2 value onto what was there before. You can see that when I paint on it more, it adds another 0.2 on there. I might select abdomen 1 here and maybe add a little bit of influence as well on some of these verts. And we can further test it. And I think for the time being, that's good. I think I'll move on to the legs. So I'm going to hide this part of my insect, and I'll make the legs visible. Once again, we can go to Skin, Paint Skin Weights. Again, this is where naming them can be very handy, because I know that this is going to be the RF1 here, so we can just find it. I actually don't want any weights on this side for those legs there, so we can get rid of that. We can try just bringing the value down to 0 and replacing it and painting away that influence. And I'm going to crank the value back up to 1 and start painting those weights on the leg. And we can quickly test it out, see how the legs are deforming. And they appear to be working pretty good, pretty well. So the tools that I've just shown you, we could use just those tools and basically paint our skin weights on the whole insect and finish it that way. However, I would like to show you another technique that I oftentimes use that sometimes is a little quicker, and in fact it'll be a little quicker in this case. Let me show you what I'm talking about. So I'm going to select my mesh here. I'm going to go to component mode, and we'll select vertices. And what I'm going to do is select the vertices on this middle leg here. I'm going to grow my selection like this. So I have all of these vertices selected on this kind of upper third of this middle leg here. And what I'm going to do is go to Windows, and we're going to find under General Editors, the Component Editor. And here we'll get a spreadsheet. Under Smooth Skins, what we're looking at is all of our joints and all of the vertices that we currently have selected. Every single vertex in our model has a unique number assigned to it. And the only vertices that we're seeing are the ones that I currently have selected. Now, what I can do also is go over to Options and hide 0 columns. That'll hide anything that doesn't have any value on it. Actually, it was already checked. This indicates that actually we have some very minute values on some of these, like this 0.001. Let's take a look at another way that we can quickly get rid of some of that actually. Select my mesh. I'm going to go to Skin, and I'm going to prune small weights. This will just get rid of some of those minor little weights. We'll go ahead and leave this at a very small number of this 0.01, or we could go a little higher, maybe 0.05. Go ahead and apply. Come in here once again, select those vertices. You can see that really kind of cleaned things up. We're not looking at nearly as much stuff in here now. And I'm going to assign all these verts to the RM leg 1. And I can do so by selecting all of these numbers in that column. And I can just take this slider actually and just crank it all the way up to 1. So now these vertices are being 100% affected by that joint. We'll do the same to this part of the leg here. Grow my selection. We'll assign all the vertices that we currently have selected to the RM leg 2 joint. Looks like actually it kept some small values that probably aren't all that important, but the slider didn't entirely work. What we can do is just come in here and type 1. And we'll do the same to this part of the leg, the lower third of the leg. And assign them to the appropriate joint. So that's a very quick and easy way to get skin weights done for especially these things where they're being weighted 100% to the joint. I'm going to go ahead and quickly do the same to this back leg here. So I used in the case of the rest of the legs and the antenna, I went ahead and I used the component editor. I used the spreadsheet for accomplishing the skin weights on the right legs and antenna. Now I need to move on to the left. Now, fortunately, we can do this quite easily because in this case, the creature is symmetrical. And what I can do is go to Skin, Mirror Skin Weights, open up its tool settings, and it's very important that we know what, where we're mirroring from. We want to make sure that we mirror the, in this case, the insect's right side to the insect's left side. So I'm going to make sure that we do it in the right direction. If I make a mistake, then I'll just undo and try it again. What's important to take a look at is whether we're going from positive to negative in this case. And in this case, it looks like, actually, according to my gnomon here, I'm going from negative to positive, so I'm not going to have that checked. We'll go ahead and try applying. And then we'll just quickly test it out. And it appears to work. I'm going to move on to the pinchers here. I have those as a separate mesh, so once again, conveniently, I can hide the rest of it. Not absolutely necessary, but it does make the job a little bit easier. What I'm going to do with this is that same method where I used that spreadsheet. One thing I should show you is that if I double click on a vertex here, Before, what I was doing was selecting some vertices and then growing my selection by holding down Shift and an arrow key. But actually in this case I can just double click on a single vertex and it'll select everything on this continuous mesh. So now I can just go to Window, General Editors, Component Editor, and we'll apply the weights 100% to the right pincher. I could mirror this for the other side, but I think I'll go ahead and just select all the vertices because it's a pretty simple thing to do. And we'll just apply all those 100% to the L pincher. And we can test it out. And it appears to work nicely. So I believe I've pretty much gone over all the techniques I'm going to be using to do the rest of the skin weights for this insect. So at this point I'm going to be speeding up the video. If there's anything I need to explain afterwards, I'll explain it after having done the rest of the skin weights on this mesh, or on this collection of meshes here. So I spent a few moments just tweaking some of the weights. It could still use a little bit more tweaking, but it's in a pretty good state. You probably noticed that I was testing out some of the various joints on it to make sure that things deformed as I intend. This is a necessary step, a necessary stage in the process of doing the skin weights, is testing it and making sure that the deformation is good. But now what I have here is something that I can pose. I can select the various joints on it and easily pose them now. I can put the creature here, this stag beetle, in any pose that I want, simply by posing primarily through rotation the joints on this skeleton. And in fact, not only can we pose the skeleton, we can of course animate it as well. So for instance, these pinchers, I can take them and key them. Pose and animate. In the next video, we'll take a look at just very briefly some techniques that will add a little bit more functionality to this skeleton, make it a little bit easier to pose as well as to animate. In the next video, we'll take a look at IK, inverse kinematics. I hope that this video has been helpful for you, and thank you for watching.